Welcome to Sunrise Life, the podcast where we have deep conversations with fellow traveling models. And today I have Lilly Rae on the line. Say hello.
Hi, everybody.
I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I know that we talked a little bit about like an underwater shoot that you had like a while back. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to getting to know you better through the course of this
Yeah,
podcast.
likewise, babe.
Cool. So, can you tell me how you first got into modeling?
Sure thing. So, like most of us, I fell into it. It was never something that I would have ever imagined that I would be doing. I was at this thing that was called yoga camp. It was exactly what it sounds like. It was a yoga camp, and it was in Melbourne, Victoria, outside of Melbourne, Victoria, in the summer by a big, beautiful river. So it was pretty hot. So everyone was in the river many times during the day, and most people were swimming naked. That was the norm in those groups, and I was quite comfortable in that kind of a situation. And I was making a lot of friends there, and one new friend that I was making, he is a photographer, and he asked me if I would be interested in doing a photo shoot with him, a nude photo shoot. And instantly I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd just been through a really big time in my life of change, and I really felt like quite a different person within myself. And I thought that would be an amazing way to capture myself, like completely nude, like this is me, nothing to hide. Anyway, we did the shoot and it was great, and both of us were totally blown away by how many incredible images there were. And another interesting thing was that when we were looking at the photos right after the shoot, I could not believe it. I was like, that's how I look? I guess my whole life I've been suffering from a bit of body dysmorphia and couldn't really see myself clearly. So I was like, what? I look like that? That's great. And anyway, he then told me that there were some women who made their living doing that kind of modeling. And I didn't know how or didn't know anything more than that, but definitely my interest was piqued. He did show me the
Cool.
website of, Ivory Flame. Yeah. And so that was the first art model that I'd ever come across. And then I must have
Oh,
been
did you saw her online or did you get to meet her in
no,
person?
no, online. He in that same moment he showed me her website. He was like,
Oh,
"Yeah,
cool.
he only knew of one model who he knew that there were models that did it professionally, but that was the only one he could recall in that moment." And he was like, "Oh, check out her stuff here."
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
amazing.
amazing. Yeah, so I was super inspired, and I guess I can't remember who, but I guess I must have been speaking to some friends about my shoot later that week, and someone told me about Model Mayhem. So I put the photos from the shoot up, and immediately, like within an hour, I started getting paid modeling requests. And it just kind of went from there. And within a couple of months, I was full time modeling.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So you went right into nude modeling from the very start.
Yep.
Did you have any hesitations about having nude images online?
No, not really. Not back then. I don't know. I mean, I guess I probably did. It was a while ago. That was like 14 years ago. So it's hard to remember my mentality. I guess there's always been a certain small degree of caution around it, but I support nudity. Nudity is different from sexuality for me, and I'm very much an art model, and I feel that the feminine form should be celebrated as the most exquisite piece of art that it is. And I've always, kind of stayed on the art side of things. So I've always felt like I'm confident and I back up what I'm doing. And, my family have always known what I'm doing, and different people have their own different opinions, but everyone's fairly supportive of what I do. So, yeah.
That's great that your family is fairly supportive. A lot of people don't have that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, some of them don't actually agree with modeling. Like my brother in law, for example, he doesn't actually agree with modeling in general. He doesn't agree with women quote unquote flaunting their beauty and their sexuality that hooks into men. And yeah, he's him and his but my sister are Christian, so there's that. But they
Oh
respect
boy.
me. They respect me. They would never say, he's never said anything against anything, and we have a wonderful relationship. So there's still a degree of respect and support, even though he doesn't agree with it.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's positive.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you say that your brother, your
That's
brother-in-law,
my
and then
brother-in-law.
okay,
Mm.
cool. So does religion like go in your family or
Yes, but like I grew up as Christian, and my sisters are still Christian, but in a not very like intensely religious, much more kind of open way.
okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That topic's come up in the podcast quite a bit because some people who were raised by like really orthodox religious parents ended up rebelling,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's others that have had a less intense experience with religion. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have been quite rebellious person in my youth.
yeah,
Yeah, and definitely got into all kinds of things and trouble and all sorts of stuff growing up. But and I guess, I think all of us nude models are rebels.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I would definitely agree with that.
yeah, I feel like there's an element of that because it's definitely against the norm, that's for sure. It's certainly not vanilla.
That's true. That's definitely true. We're rebelling against something, whether or not it's, our upbringing or like a religion or being sheltered.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you said rebelling against, and when I was thinking of the word rebel, and that's what it means. It means to rebel against. But yeah, I don't know that I was rebelling against something. It was more just that I have a very adventurous, open, kind of go get it, explorative soul. And I was kind of referring to that as being a rebel. But
Yeah.
maybe that's rebelling against societal norms.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I fully align with that. My alias was Rebel for a long time, actually. I fully align with that because, like, I don't think that the white picket fence, working at an office, 9 to 5, having a 2 kids and a cat and a dog. I don't think that's for everybody.
Hell no. Yeah, I'm about to turn 42 and I've literally worked a 9 to 5 job for 3 months of my entire life.
Whoa, how was that?
Short lived.
Yeah, yeah, 3 months. Like, when you said 3 months, I was like, okay, there's a reason it was so short.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was going through a big breakup at the time and had a bunch of money saved and just ended up kind of going traveling instead.
Wow,
Hmm.
that's awesome.
Hmm.
That's totally awesome. Yeah, anytime that I've stepped foot inside an office, I kind of look around and I'm like, damn, like even just the lighting
Oh
in an
my gosh.
office alone is enough to make me like cringe.
Totally. Yeah. I don't understand how people can do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So I'm really happy that you're exposing your age because I'm very pro like being honest about our age as
Yeah.
models on the internet, and not everybody on my podcast has been like willing to expose their age, especially if
Mm.
they're over 30 or over 40. So I think that's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. I actually
Yes.
did some duo work with AIM model, and
Uh-huh.
she's 15 or 17 years younger than me. 17 years younger than me.
Mhm.
And you can't really tell. So I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think art modeling is really forgiving on
Yeah,
like just there's not really a standard for what you're supposed to look like because it's art.
that's right.
You're making cool shapes and you're emoting,
That's
and that's what
right.
it's all about.
And every single photographer I've ever spoken to about that, number one, they're like, "What? You're 42?" For starters. So I guess I'm blessed with, not, I've never looked my age. I've always looked young for my age. And I think that's partly because of how much cultivated joy and health that I have in my life. But number two, they've always they've expressed again and again how they actually prefer a bit of maturity and a life experience in a model rather than just the allure of youth. At least I've
Mhm.
heard that again and again. I'm sure that's not the case with every photographer, but at least the kind of
Yeah.
photographers I work for, which are always focused on the art side of things. That's what they say. And for the most part, they don't want to shoot only 25-year-old models. So, yeah,
And
again,
then the photographers that intentionally target the models who just turned 18
right.
or like, are very young, those are generally the ones that might be a little weird
That's right. And
anyway.
you can spot them a mile away just from a single glance of their portfolio.
So when you first started your model mayhem, like you had your first shoot, you said 14 years ago, and then
Mm,
sometime later after that, you started your model mayhem. And you got a flood of messages right at the beginning.
yeah.
Can you describe what that was like? Because I hear about that all the time, and I remember what it was like for me when I first signed up. But was it overwhelming? Did you get messages that were like giving off a certain vibe?
I found it exciting. I was excited. I was excited to find a new way to be able to support myself financially in a way that felt creative and, yeah, it felt exciting at the time. I do suddenly remember, I think it was my second ever paid shoot, and I remember that he went into a lot of detail about exactly what we were doing, like kind of excessively so. And then I showed up and he said that we weren't going to be doing nudity and all these different things. And then very, very quickly he asked me to get nude. And
What?
I know. And I just felt so uncomfortable. I got nude, it was a long time ago and I didn't really know how to speak up for myself very well back then. And I got nude, but I was so uncomfortable. I couldn't pretend. And so pretty soon I started communicating with him and it was so uncomfortable that we ended up calling off the shoot. And I just remember because I actually recently found the messages from with him and went back through them, and I was mostly able to communicate more clearly after the shoot via message about how disappointing that was, and how that was my second ever paid shoot. Yeah, he ended up getting quite defensive, and eventually after me communicating more and more clearly, he acknowledged what I was saying and apologized. But yeah, I remember feeling a little overwhelmed by that.
Wow. Yeah. So you said that he was really communicative about all the details in advance
Mm,
and said that there wasn't going to be any nudity.
yeah.
But then once you got there, he told you to strip
Yeah.
nude.
Really, really, really early on in the shoot too, like in pretty much in the first set.
And I mean, that's kind of odd. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you were already comfortable with
Exactly.
nudity because you'd
Exactly.
already posed nude.
Exactly. Yeah, but
But to have
I
somebody
lost
tell you the
trust.
plan.
I lost trust with him. It's like he went to the
Yeah.
nth degree to communicate, like over communicate all these details, and it's like you need to build trust between the photographer and the model for the model to feel really comfortable, and then even more so for the model to bring her deepest magic to be able to be captured.
Yeah.
And the more comfortable a model is, the more expressive she's going to be able to be. And yeah, and so I just lost trust with him. And it wasn't about nudity, it was just that he was communicating one thing and then doing another.
Yeah, and it makes you uneasy. I totally
Yeah.
get that. And sometimes I feel like when somebody contacts me and they say that they don't want to shoot nudes, it makes me feel like, okay, well, what? I mean, I'm obviously not a fashion model. If you go to my portfolio, it's primarily involving nudity.
Yeah.
And I feel like some of these photographers, they maybe think that like by asking to do a nude shoot right off the bat that they are being creepy, so they want to sound like they're not. And then when you I don't know, I'm just wondering psychologically why he did that.
Yeah, I really don't know. I kind of felt like that was actually his legitimate plan, and then in the moment he got caught up and
Yeah, that's the worst.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I feel
How
like,
awkward.
yeah. And I don't know, I felt so young back then, and that's why I have no problem communicating clearly these days. That's for sure. I'm a very clear and also compassionate and kind communicator, and I know that there's a lot of younger and more insecure models who cannot communicate. So I actually really take it quite seriously to be able to use my voice to stand up for all of us, to educate people who, the thing is that I really do believe that if somebody's doing something like that, he's not really aware of himself. He's not really aware of his impact, and he's not meaning to be, sleazy and untrustworthy. And with the right communication and the right education, he's going to be inspired to behave in a different way.
Yeah, and definitely having your actions match your words is a good way to be trusted.
That's
But if
right.
you say that your intentions are one thing and then your actions indicate completely the opposite, that would make me feel a little uneasy also.
Exactly. Exactly.
So speaking about like, awkward moments and stuff, I have this part of my podcast that I call the photo shoot fail of the week. It's an opportunity for you to describe a photo shoot that was crazy, either because the situation surrounding the photo shoot was crazy, perhaps the photographer themselves was crazy. What's one of your crazy?
Well, I have one that's very fresh. It happened last week.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I was in Sydney. I'm on tour right now. I'm in Brisbane and I was in Sydney last week. I actually just recently moved back to Australia after over a decade living in the States.
Wow.
And yeah, so I was in Sydney working with a wonderful photographer who I got along really well with. And we wanted to do a shoot on the beach. And so, like, a lot of it was not nude, but we wanted to do some nude. And so we went to dun dun, a nude beach.
Oh boy.
And it seems to be something about nude beaches that encourage and bring out some of the most disgusting behavior in people
Yeah.
and a certain degree of entitlement, and it was absolutely horrible. I'm still cringing thinking about the experience. And so, anyway, the first beach is not nude, and then you have to walk along this walkway to get to the second little beach, which is a nude beach. And we didn't even get to the second beach. We were halfway there, and we went out onto this rock outcrop because it was beautiful and, away from everybody. Yes, there's the walkway not too far from there that the people walking to and from the nude beach could see. But, I'm being very discreet. I've got like a lace kind of throw thing over. So, anyone that's walking there, I kind of cover myself. Anyway, it was just the particular kind of leering that I was getting was just so disgusting. I understand. You're walking along in nature and you suddenly see a nude woman. Oh my gosh, that is amazing and shocking thing to see. Of course, everyone's going to look. There's no problem with that. That's natural. The female form is the most magnetic and powerful thing that exists on this planet. It's natural. But then when you see how that's interacting with the woman, how she's reacting to that, that's actually what matters. And for the most part, people are like, whoa, and then they just keep walking. And that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But a particular kind of leering that is just feels so gross, that kept happening. So we moved down the rocks where no one could see us, like down over the edge of the rocks to these other gorgeous, gorgeous shapes in the rock there. And then one guy came and literally sought out, like he had to climb down to even be able to see me. And then he's standing there with the most disgusting look on his face. And I'm shouting up to him, I'm like, can you please leave? And he wouldn't. I was like, can you please leave? And he wouldn't. And I start getting more and more forceful with my voice. I'm like, seriously, you're making me uncomfortable. Can you please leave? While I'm just kind of sitting there on the rock covering myself. And the photographer, he didn't really know what to do. He was just kind of standing by. And he wouldn't leave. And so I was like, all right. So I just basically stood up, crossed my arms over my chest, and death stared him with just quite a bit of anger behind me. And I was like, I am not looking away until you leave, and just kind of boring into his soul. And he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle it. And he started to leave, and then he came back, and I just stayed there. I didn't move until he left. So I was like, okay, that was really uncomfortable, and just kind of shook it off. And then there was another guy that was
Oh my
hiding
god.
in the bushes masturbating.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
I
god. How
know.
awkward.
I know. And so the photographer was like, "We're out of here." And we just called it quits and left. It was just, oh, such a horrible feeling. It just feels so gross that, like, yeah, that entitlement, it's like a taking it feels like a taking of my essence, trying to take something from me. And just because it's on a
Yeah.
nude beach, they feel entitled to that. And it's like, what the heck?
Right. Like there's not like lifeguards there that are appointed to,
Mm,
tell people to not do that.
mm.
So it's kind of like a free for all, right?
But I feel like they wouldn't behave quite so disgustingly if it was just on a regular beach.
Right. Right. Well, that's true. Right. And there's a bikini is such a small piece of fabric
Exactly.
too to denote that difference,
Exactly.
whether or not they can see your
Yeah.
nipples. It makes it just
It's
I
astounding.
you know you are at least the third or fourth person on this podcast who had nude beach incident that was their photo shoot fail of the week story.
Yeah.
And I've definitely had multiple experiences that are kind of similar also. So this is a very common
Yeah.
occurrence. Like
Yeah.
this is a very common occurrence. And I'm sure that there's people that are even not doing photo shoots that, get the same kind of behavior from people
Yeah.
at the
No doubt.
beach, at the nude
No.
beach. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, like, do not be that guy.
Do not be that guy. Come on.
I
Please.
can't I can't it's just as bad as, like, when people send you dick
Yeah.
pics. It's like, nobody likes that. You are being a complete weirdo douchebag for doing
Yeah.
that. Nobody enjoys that kind of behavior, like,
Yeah.
come on.
Exactly.
Awkward.
Mhm.
That is so awkward.
Mhm.
Damn, and that was just last
Last week.
week. And in Australia,
Mhm.
too.
Mhm. Well, in
In
Australia,
Australia.
I don't. I feel that sexuality is pretty repressed.
You think
Yeah.
so?
Yeah.
I guess. I've been there a few times, and my sense was that it wasn't as repressed as the United States, but I
Mm,
suppose there's probably, like, a lot of areas that have more
yeah.
religion in them.
Yeah, I guess compared to certain areas in the States, like the Bible Belt and that, for sure, it's more repressed. But,
Yeah.
I was living in California for the most part, and it felt very similar.
Wow. What part of California were you living in?
I was living in a small little town, country town called Nevada City in Northern California, and between there and the island of Kauai.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you ever go to nude beaches in the United States?
I don't think so. Not specifically, no.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, in
similar
Hawaii.
situations.
In
Oh, okay.
Maui, on Maui, but there's tons of people there on Little Beach, and it's like a Sunday thing where heaps of people congregate there, so it's a little bit of a different vibe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm sorry about those two weirdos.
Yeah.
Whacking off in the bushes, too.
Ew. Oh God.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Damn.
What
So,
about you? Have you had any weird experiences lately?
lately, you know, not
Thank
lately. Nothing
goodness.
comes to mind for the recent past. I suppose I've definitely I had a photographer get really weird with me over Instagram, and I had to block him. And then he, like, showed up to a workshop
Oh
that was
God.
like over 100 miles away from the city that he lived in. He found out that I was going to be posing for a workshop and showed up just so that he could photograph me and have images of me in his portfolio.
Oh no.
And then when later he emailed me and was telling me about how amazing the shoot was, and he wanted to, apologize for any awkwardness. And basically what happened over Instagram is I was telling him my rates, and he didn't want to pay my
Mm,
rates, and I told him that my rates are industry standard compared to other models of my level of
yeah.
experience. And he freaked out and called me a communist, saying that there's no such thing as industry standard rates, and started throwing a fit. And then I was like, all right, dude, we're not shooting, obviously, because you're having a cow right
Yeah.
now. And I blocked him.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to deal with his
Yeah.
drama.
Fair.
And then he emailed me, and he was very apologetic. And I almost responded positively to his apology email. But at the end of it, he described that he says like, don't listen to so and so model because the sexual assault allegations aren't
Oh
true, and then
dear.
he proceeded to talk shit about a model that he allegedly sexually assaulted. And I was like, okay, well,
Yikes.
screw this guy, he's a nut job.
Yeah.
And I complained to the workshop organizer for allowing him at the event. So that was probably the most recent. That was like
Mm.
last summer though.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like nothing as weird as somebody whacking off in the bushes while I'm trying to do a photo shoot.
Yeah. Gross.
Haven't had anything like that, but I have had some weird nude beach experiences
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
It, I can't understand it. Like, why would you be that guy? However, I will tell a short story about a positive nude beach experience
Okay.
where if you're listening and you ever see a nude photo shoot happening and you want to watch, do what this guy did. So I was posing for a nude shoot in San Diego, California, and this guy comes up to me and the photographer, and he's naked, and he said, "Wow, it's really amazing what you guys are doing out here." I was like doing like balancing stuff and like no like some nude yoga poses. And he said, "Is it okay if I just keep my distance if I sit down and watch, as you do this?" And we agreed, as long as you're not in the background of the photo, like that should be fine. So he asked permission to sit and watch, and he did, and he got out of the background of the photo anytime he might have been in it. And then at the end, he was like super polite. He was like, "Thank you so much. That was amazing. Where can I find you guys online?" And then we shared our Tumblr URLs with him. And that was the best. I was like, wow, what a guy. Like, if only more people could just be polite,
Yeah.
just because you're naked doesn't mean you don't deserve like politeness or
Right,
respect.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this whole thing around people needing to understand the difference between nudity and sexuality.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. Like it's not an intimate setting.
No,
Like you're not there so that somebody can like masturbate and watch you.
exactly. Yeah, even one of my close friends, when he found out what I was doing, he he didn't even realize that he made the assumption that included at the shoot would be some kind of an energetic erotic exchange. And I was like, absolutely not. At least not for the kind of modeling that I do. Absolutely not. And even in the photos that might look a bit more sexy, it's literally a pose that I'm holding for a second.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I, like many of us, I capture some behind the scenes videos. And there's just one that's so accurately depicts how not erotic a photo shoot is, whereas the actual results can look pretty sexy.
Yeah.
And it's just him, the photographer, and I are just chatting about the new AI capacities in Photoshop.
Mm.
And you can see he's really not even tracking what I'm doing and totally not at all affected by my modeling. We're just having this pretty technical chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that aren't like actively doing model photography might not understand that. But
Right.
even in erotic shoot, like the photographer, I mean, not in every case, because some people, are not professional, but usually, even in an explicit shoot,
Yeah.
like the photographer's focusing on their settings and
Yeah.
their composition and the
Yeah.
lighting. They're not sitting there like
Interacting.
getting a
Yeah.
hard
Right.
on.
Yeah, that makes
Right.
total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if I recall, you also have a podcast, don't you?
I do. It's interesting though, coming on to this podcast today, because yeah, I noticed that right before when I was, just thinking about what we're going to be talking about, I started actually feeling a little bit nervous because I usually keep my worlds extremely separate.
Oh.
I was modeling full time for about 6 years. And then for about 6 or so years, it was very, very, very much a part time thing. And I never really sorted out. It was only what came to me in my little country town. And I just did, I don't know, maybe like 4 jobs a year, like super minimal, and cultivated many other things in my life. And I never would have foreseen that I would get back into modeling full time so extravagantly and at over 40 years old.
Hmm.
Never would have imagined that. But yeah, I actually put all my stuff in storage over 2 years ago and have been kind of moving around the world, working out where I wanted to live next. And it just took a really long time to work that out, that I'm going to be moving back home to Australia. And so all the things that I was cultivating in that other time, many things, I'm also a photographer myself. I'm a potter, but more importantly, I'm a life coach, a podcast, and I have definitely an online personality. I'm an influencer in the realms of intimacy, sex, polarity, relationships. And I definitely have kept my nude modeling very, very separate. And while I completely stand behind my modeling work and have no problem sharing with anybody, I'm also aware that even the artistic stuff, it does, how to say, kind of light fires. It sparks fires. It sparks responses in, especially in the male population, and different kind of ones in the female population. I just usually like to keep my worlds very, very separate. Yeah, and so I noticed coming on today, and even in my photo shoots, I noticed that very few photographers are actually really seemingly interested. They don't, I don't think they realize how much they don't actually get to know me. And I feel like such a very tiny portion of who I am is even seen at all by photographers. And I have a very interesting life that is very, very multifaceted, and I think that most people can't even comprehend the kind of life that I have led. But yeah, I very often feel like just a tiny little slice of me is actually coming out in photo shoots and in those environments, and I'm often noticing how little photographers actually really get to know me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And do you want to keep it that way for branding
Yeah.
purposes?
Yeah, I'm not going to share what the name of my podcast and my professional name on here.
Cool.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
That's totally cool with me.
Yeah.
I think it's very fascinating though, because a lot of people do have a brand for their modeling that is like its own oasis.
Yeah.
And I suppose there are benefits and disadvantages to that.
Mm.
And one of the disadvantages is that people on the outside might not know how multi talented you are.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I find with certain photographers where I do have more of an actual like friendship that's built with them, where they do actually see me more and get to know me more. And I will share my podcast and the details of my personal life with them. But often I don't really want to share my inner realm with everybody. It's only really the
Right.
people that I actually feel a true kind of like level of kinship with that I would even want to share more of the inner realms of my life with.
Yeah.
Mm.
On my end, that kind of resonates a little bit when a photographer finds my OnlyFans page. And I'm like, not that I'm trying to keep it a secret, but
Yeah.
I think some people they see that and they're like, "Oh, this is what I'm getting at my photo shoot, right?"
Mm.
And it's not.
Definitely not. Yeah. Yeah, and it makes me think about my very, very favorite shoot ever. Well, it was a series of shoots just a few months ago with a photographer that I stayed at his place for 5 days while on tour. And we shot together, I think, 5 times. And I just had that really, really rare degree of friendship with him. And we felt very kindred, but it was not, he felt very fatherly to me, actually. It was all very, very clean, and
Oh,
he actually felt very fatherly. And we just had the most incredible conversations every evening over dinner, and just really delved into such deep realms of sharing to a very rare degree, and I felt incredibly seen and understood by him in a very broad way. And the photos that we created were my favorite photos yet, and I just, yeah, so much more of me came out and was expressed when I was feeling more seen. So I found that quite interesting.
I love that. Yeah. When it comes to your modeling, is there like a particular vibe or message that you like to portray through the images?
Hmm. Well, it's not conscious. I'm not like aiming for it, but I noticed that at least lately I've kind of been going back and forth between two fairly broad spectrum but kinds of expressions. And one is like it can be a little bit more regal, kind of sensual, soft, intricate, dainty, very connected with myself. So there's that kind of expression. And then the other realm that I've really been enjoying is like very kind of fiery and primal and almost like feline. And yeah, and I've been just really enjoying that. That's just seemingly very natural for me to kind of explore those two realms more so than others.
I love that. That's awesome. So, as a model that's now in your 40s,
Hmm.
do you feel that you wanna continue modeling, like, indefinitely, or do you have a sense that there's going to be a time that you're gonna wanna perhaps wrap it up?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to continue full-time modeling indefinitely. I actually, and now that I'm back in Australia, I'm moving into a new home in the middle of April, which I'm so excited about. And oh, a little side note, I'm actually setting up my own photography studio at that place. So photographers will be able to come
Sweet.
and shoot me there, and I'm going to be building up my photography business once again. And yeah, so that
Awesome.
feels exciting. So yeah, I will still model, but maybe just like a couple of tours a year. And I'm sure that that will fade out, but I would love to model for the rest of my life just to be able to document my life. Like I imagine doing shoots when I'm really old, just to be documenting myself throughout my life, through my whole adulthood. And I think that's just such an amazing and beautiful idea.
That's awesome. I love that, and I think that's definitely a theme with a lot of people that I've talked to who are older models that
Mm,
do wanna continue doing it because I feel like there's not enough old
right,
models, like over 60, like, you don't see it very often, and
right.
when I do see it, I, like, really wanna check it out and, like, look at all their stuff, and
Yeah.
it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I have no idea like how much I'd want to share that online or where. I don't know until I get to those late levels. But yeah, I definitely want to document it for myself. And I've heard many photographers speak about how they would shoot more mature models if there were more.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and there I don't think there are very many, like, there
Oh,
are some people, but I don't see very many older models, like, advertising that they're going on
right.
tour or that they're available for shoots.
Yeah.
Like, usually when I do see photos of an older model, it's either, like, they're with an agency in New York and they're,
Mm,
like, super professional
mm,
and they're not really working with freelancers, or, like,
in their
you
area.
could tell you some of them I can tell it's like they have maybe one photographer that
Right.
they work with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's confronting modeling as you age, you know, especially because I had such a big gap and then coming back and you know, the images that I put on my portfolio, they're edited. You know, and for every amazing image, we see plenty of terrible images, you know, and
Yeah,
you've got to have such thick skin as a model because you're seeing every single side of yourself. So you're seeing the most beautiful, but you're seeing the most horrid all the time. And it is
yeah,
very confronting aging as a model and knowing what you used to look like and what you look like now. But it's also a really beautiful process of just coming to terms with it all and just being like, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I got. So
yeah.
and just coming to a deeper place of self acceptance and self love.
And for the clarity of the people listening, because I've seen your pictures and, you mentioned that they're edited, but I don't think that they're heavily airbrushed or anything like that.
I
I
think
feel
some of
like
them really there's plenty in there that are
some of
not.
them.
Some in there plenty in there that are not edited at all. But there's a bunch in there that that photographers just heavily edit them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as far as what you post though, do you feel like if an image is heavily edited, depending on the image, do you still share it?
Yeah, for me it's not about the editing. For me, what I share, it's about I try never to share two poses that are the same. So for me,
Yeah.
it's about sharing the breadth of my capacity of expression. And so if it's
Cool. That makes
something
a
that
lot of
I
sense.
have, like a pose I haven't shared, it's because I try to really flow pose and caption new poses every time. And I do. I capture new poses every single shoot because I'm not. Of course, like every model, I have all the go tos. That would be impossible to model without that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm only ever sharing stuff that hasn't been expressed before, really. So whether it's heavily edited or lightly edited doesn't matter as much as it's like the quality of the expression.
Love that. So that it shows off your variety
Mm,
and your ability to pose with lots of variations to your poses.
right.
Cool. I want to take a short little break to tell you about Model Society. ModelSociety.com is a website dedicated to featuring figurative fine art photography for models and photographers. What makes them different than other portfolio hosting websites is that some of those other websites will still host kind of tacky photography or exploitative photos. Model Society screens all of their contributors for quality and authenticity. So you only get the best of the best on there. If you're not a photographer or model, you can still enjoy and appreciate Model Society because they also have newsletters and magazines featuring their best work and new articles each week. Check it out, modelsociety.com. I will also include a link to Model Society in the show notes. All right, now back to our show.
Mhm.
I have another question that I ask everybody on the show. I call it the rising phoenix era of your life. And this could be related to your modeling or not, just anything that you want to describe. But can you describe a situation where you were faced with a challenge that you had to overcome? Could be related to your modeling career or facing an insecurity.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was thinking about this beforehand, and I really couldn't come up with like a single event where I was faced with something, but just more over my life in general of just really being so determined to find such a deep state of wholeness within myself and unraveling all of the programming and thought structures and belief systems that tell me that lean towards me being anything other than whole and perfect simply because I exist. And so this has been a very ongoing, progressive, gradual process of unraveling into just real total acceptance of all that I am and no longer judging myself really for anything, but having such levels of compassion with myself. And there's been so many different layers to that. There's been a lot of, I guess you could call it shadow work, and I call it reparenting of going into the parental wounding and the different attachment templates that I had, and just really, 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 I've done a lot of meditation in my life, and I'm a very introspective person and just really looked at myself really blatantly and really looked at all the things that I haven't wanted to see in myself and learned that that really is the only way to actually find more wholeness and more freedom in my being. And yeah, I now walk this earth feeling just really, really stable in myself, really, really good, very, I have this sense of deep confidence balanced with humility and just a really deep sense of wholeness. And it's taken me, over 20 years of gradual work on myself to really truly integrate and arrive there.
Oh, that's really amazing. I'm trying to wrap my mind around it as I've only in the last year or so have I been aware of the concept of reparenting and shadow work and attachment styles.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sense that attachment styles in the last couple of years have there have been more and more like channels on social media that raise awareness about this kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know if it's more recent because the research is more recent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more recent just because humans were evolving over time, and we're paying more and more attention to these things. So yeah, there's been a lot of more and more research, and then it's become more popular, and more people have been exploring it within their own selves and their relationships. And yeah, there's a lot of really good podcasts on it.
Yeah, and I've listened to some of them too, and I find them very fascinating.
Yeah.
The reparenting in particular, because when you are raised, if your parents, nobody's perfect, right? No
No.
parent is perfect. There's no way that anybody could know how to be a parent. There's not a good handbook on it. And even if they are reading handbooks, it's just, your kid is their own person too. So we
Yeah.
just react to things differently.
Yeah.
And so I find that very fascinating because it sounds like not that there's like a void within you, but that you've come to understand yourself more, like despite the shadows that you've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often say that I've been blessed to live a life with a lot of suffering. I've been through a lot of really heavy, challenging things in my life, and I've learnt to come out the other side totally loving and trusting. And that's why I say I've been blessed, because it's been, kind of the school of hard knocks that has really enabled me to become who I am.
That's awesome. I love that. And from what I've seen on your images, some of that definitely shows in like the emotions that you have in your photos.
Thanks, babe. I'm glad that comes across.
Yeah, absolutely. So with your modeling as its own brand and entity, like I'm so curious, like because you've mentioned that you want to keep that separate from everything else in your life.
Well,
Do
yeah.
you use some of your images like, in other areas of your life as well? Or is most of it just like, for portfolio purpose?
I have used a lot of images, but not anything that's nude or in lingerie. It's only clothes stuff that I've used in
Gotcha.
other ways. But yeah, I have, because of this, I've had access to have tons of really amazing images of myself, both clothed and unclothed. But I don't know if you are aware of this, but with my Instagram, I kind of go back and forth between it being private and not private. But every single day, I'm going through every follower or follow request, and I'm basically deleting or blocking every single person that's not a photographer, that's focused more on the art side of things, or
Oh,
or a model. So for me, it's not, I'm not trying to get likes, I'm not trying to get all the followers. I'm literally, it's just for work purposes. Because,
I see.
yeah.
That is definitely a different method
Hmm.
than most people that I've seen online do because a lot of people really want to just gain a bunch of
Right.
followers, but you heavily curate who's
Heavily.
able to see your
Heavily. And
photos.
this is for many reasons. Number one, because then I root out all of the bots. And so my photos don't get
Yeah,
flagged.
that's nice.
Unless I actually accidentally, this happened only twice, and I accidentally didn't censor my nipples. And then it just happened immediately as I posted it. But I don't get that whole thing that everybody gets like months down the track, where all of a sudden a number of photos are flagged that are not actually going against the guidelines. Like, that's the bots that do that for whatever reason. And that doesn't happen to me, knock on wood. So there's that. But I don't like the feeling of random men ogling at me. If I know that people have an artistic eye and can view the feminine form as the piece of art that it is, and I can tell that by a person's portfolio. And occasionally, even if someone's an actual painter or artist, occasionally, if I appreciate their work, I'll let them through as well, because I know that they're going to be viewing me with a particular kind of eye. And that's just something, because we all have our own boundaries. We all have our things that feel right and wrong to each of us. And there's nothing inherently right or wrong. There's no line where, okay, that's good and that's bad. It just depends what it feels for each of us, and we all only have our own like internal guidance system to guide us, and it's all
Yes.
equally valid. Like, I would never judge anyone else for having different standards, like, because my standards would be way more liberal than other people's who might judge me.
Right.
And so I know that we've all just only got what feels right for us, and that's just something that I really can't stand, is random people ogling at me. That's just I just have no interest in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if this question is like too much, but I have had experiences in the past, like a long time ago, where I created a Facebook page for like a different brand. I was like going to be working for some website, and it was like supposed to be just really sexy. And even back then, this is like I think 10 years ago, Facebook's facial recognition software was suggesting that people tag me in my like secret aliases page
Right.
because it scanned my face. Are you concerned about like your brands with your images being like basically outed because of facial recognition software?
Yeah, I mean, I accidentally outed myself. Yeah, because I this Instagram that I have right now, it's only just a I don't know, like just over a year old. My other one was deleted, and when I first started sharing in this new Instagram, it somehow was linked to my personal Facebook. And it happened three
What?
times that it linked stuff that I was sharing to my personal
Oh
Facebook. And I someone messaged me, they're like, "Hey, you've got your nudes up on your thing." I'm like, "Fuck,
my
quick, delete,
gosh.
delete, delete." And so first it happened in just an actual post, and so I worked that out, found the settings for that. But then it happened over the next week on two stories. And it took a while to find the settings and what was going on there. And I finally found the settings and made sure that would never happen again. It was like, oh my God. And they're beautiful, tasteful nudes. And essentially, I really don't have an issue with it. You know, it's like if people see it, they see it. It's fine because it's beautiful, tasteful work that I really stand behind. But yeah, I still just like to keep a more professional personality shining forward. You know,
I
it's just
see.
a different realm. And I ended up actually writing a post after that on that Facebook page, just being like, well, that was embarrassing, and just explaining it because it's been seen by quite a lot of people. You know, my posts on Facebook can get a lot of likes. I'm a writer as well,
Oh,
and some of my writing can has actually gone viral on Facebook. Yeah, and so I just wrote, well, this is what I'm doing right now. I am doing this modeling, and I stand behind it. And yeah, just acknowledging that some of you may have seen that, and this is what I'm doing. But I like to keep it separate. And
yeah.
yeah, everyone that responded said that, especially the people who saw it, they didn't really think much of it. They were just thought it was a very beautiful shot, beautiful photos of me, and people were all very supportive. So I'm not really worried, but I still prefer to keep it very separate.
Yeah, I can see that for you, it sounds like it's mostly for branding
Yeah,
purposes for like your different sections of your
right.
life. But alternatively, some other people out there keep it separate because they have like crazy stalker exes or
Mm,
because their parents would disown them if they knew or they have a job like teaching or something that would fire them if they found out about their photos on the internet.
yeah,
So it sounds like it's not like of the dire utmost importance that nobody in one section of your life finds out about the other section.
exactly,
It's just for like online appearances and branding.
exactly. Yeah,
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And that's very and one thing that I want to like add to that is that there's so many models out there, you know, we're all trying to pay our bills and stuff,
right,
especially if we're doing this full time.
exactly.
And when it comes to somebody who wants to hire someone as a model and they want to, you know, push your limits or offer you extra money for doing something that you normally wouldn't do, especially in the case where you're trying to have separation between your modeling and other areas of your life,
Mm,
like you have a lot more of a reason to not like do those types of photos because like it if you are like standing by everything that you do because it's beautiful and it's like artistically focused, then taking those gigs where they're like, "Oh, I'm going to offer you extra money to do something that you're normally not comfortable with,"
mm.
then it would create perhaps a situation where you feel like you'd have to be secretive about it or whatever, right?
Mm. Well, to be honest, I haven't really come across that. I haven't really had
That's good.
people asking me to do extra things. I'm pretty clear in, in my booking agreements. And I did have literally yesterday a photographer who hadn't actually really looked at my website, hadn't read my terms and conditions, and he's not an experienced photographer at all. And he was all very excited about shooting with me, but then he was asking like what I was willing to do. And I was like, well, you look at my portfolio, if it's not there, I don't do it. And then pretty quickly we realized that he was looking for an erotic model, and kind of schooled him a little bit on, an art model is different. And if he was wanting, quote unquote, he just wanted these photos for quote unquote personal use.
Right. Yeah.
And well, you need to look for a model whose photos are a lot more like sexy than mine, and who says that they're an erotic model. And he's like, okay.
Right. Yeah. It gets really tricky. Like the farther down that rabbit hole one
Yeah.
gets, the trickier it
Yeah.
gets
The blurred
because
line.
like if you do like erotic work
Yeah.
or like there's also models that are escorts on the
Right.
side and
Right.
they can't really advertise it or like, oh, maybe some are comfortable with erotic, but they want to be branded as an art model.
Yeah.
It gets really confusing, I guess.
Yeah, I imagine it would.
But but yeah, the reason I brought that up is because I have done that. I have accepted work that I was uncomfortable with
Yeah.
because I needed money at the time. And then of course, even though the photographer promised endlessly that it wouldn't end up on the internet, I've had multiple occasions where it
Wow.
did. But those are all instances that happened like early on in my full-time
Uh-huh.
traveling
Uh-huh.
modeling.
But when just hearing you say that, it made me think of a shoot just the other day, how I we were in these mud flats, these mangroves, and there's all these like spiky things on the ground with all this mud. And I didn't realize that that's what I would be modeling in. I knew that there was mangroves there, but I didn't know that that meant I would be in the mud and on these spiky things. And, I always give my best at each shoot, and I really do my best to perform and to make each photographer happy and stoked with what they got. And I was so physically uncomfortable and frustrated with these spiky things in the mud. And, but I'm just doing my best. I'm just kind of like caught up in it and doing my best to perform as a model. And I noticed that my energy was getting more and more and more drained. And we were getting, it was only maybe half an hour left. And he's like, how are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, I'm really fading. I need to get off this mud. It's actually driving me nuts. And he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And we had a joke about it. And then as soon as I got off the spiky things in the mud, I was like, oh my God, I feel so relieved. And then I could model actually the best shots of the day. And that was really on me because he felt bad. He's like, oh, I'm sorry I made you do something uncomfortable, because he was wearing shoes the whole time. And I'm like, really? It was on me
Mhm.
because I should have spoken up earlier. And I usually do. But I mean, that's even a small, a similar thing. It's I'm doing something I'm not comfortable with, and I didn't speak up early enough.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've definitely had similar situations as well where you want to I guess it's a little bit of the people
Yeah,
pleaser in us.
yeah,
And I think so many of us traveling models have that where we're like, "Oh, I don't want to be the model that complained because what if the model he hired last week posed in this,
yeah.
you know?"
And we rely on repeat work, and we rely on our reputations massively.
Yeah, yeah. We don't want to be the one that
Yeah.
complained. But I guess in a way, like I always say that as freelance models, we're not that competitive, but we kind of are, Mentally, I'm like, oh, I know so and so could do this bending pose, and I'm not able to do
Mm,
it today. And,
yeah,
like you mentally compare your modeling abilities to what you perceive other people are able to do.
definitely. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it can be fun, but also like draining.
Yeah, training. But I try to keep it on the inspiring side of like seeing the things that I find inspiring and seeing how I can cultivate that more within myself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Well, we have gone about the length of time that I usually have these episodes. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up
This
before we wrap up the
There
show?
is one thing that I know a lot of photographers listen to this podcast. And so there's one thing that I really would love to invite and enthusiastically encourage every photographer to do. And that is when a model reaches out to you, please, 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 please take a few seconds and respond. Even if it's that you don't want to work with her, that you don't do TF, you want her to contact you in another month, like whatever it is, please, please just let her know where you stand, because the amount of hours we spend reaching out to hundreds and thousands of photographers per year is just, it's exorbitant. And that really is like the full-time job. It's all the admin stuff.
Mhm.
And most of my work comes from second and third contact with a photographer without prior response. And I keep super thorough spreadsheets that are very, very detailed. And the amount of work it takes me to be tracking every single photographer, and more than half of them, well, I don't know how many, but a huge portion never respond, and or take 3 messages to respond. And it really takes up an insane amount of hours, that if they just responded and let me know when I should recontact them, or if they're interested but not this time, or anything, just like any, like 2 sentences, it would literally make our lives so, so, so much better. So please, 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 photographers, respond to the models.
Yeah. A lot of our work is, we have to cold call
Yeah,
because everybody's cold
right.
calling. And yeah, you're right. If they don't respond, it's like, is it because you don't want to shoot with me? Like, just say yes or no at
Yeah,
least.
exactly. Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you want to shoot with me but not now? Do you want to shoot with me but you're still too busy and haven't worked out when and all that? Or do you never want to shoot with me, or do you only shoot TF? Just please let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. That is helpful. I mean, communication is at its best. And like, you're right. Like, if you are reaching out and they never want to shoot with you, they could just say that and then you would mark it down on your spreadsheet to not
I
contact
would
them
be
again.
so grateful to know. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I'll definitely share the link to your Instagram
Mm-hmm.
in the notes for the
Mm-hmm.
show. And so,
But just know, listeners,
anybody,
if you're not a photographer, you're not gonna be,
if you're not a photographer or some kind
or a
of a
model,
artist on
or
your
an artist,
page,
then you're probably not gonna be accepted.
yes. So they can only hope and pray that they will be accepted, but we'll see.
It's just business, it's not personal.
It's been a fantastic time getting to know you, and I am very fascinated by your lifestyle, how you've been traveling, and how your life has evolved over the course of the last several years. And I think this is a really interesting episode.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much for opening up, and just sharing your experiences.
Yeah, and thanks for doing this, babe. I know what it takes to run a podcast, and it's a lot of work. It's definitely a passion project. And yeah, just really acknowledging all your efforts and just seeing you as a real go-getter. I love all of the things that you create in this world. And yeah, I just appreciate your badassness and how much you make things happen, and your creative spirit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah, you're
much.
welcome.
All right, Lily. Well, I'll talk to you soon and I'll catch up with you on Instagram after
Okay,
this.
sweetheart. Bye.
I just wanted to thank you so, so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to the Sunrise Life podcast. I am so grateful every time somebody comments or sends me a DM saying that they love the show. If you would like to help other people find out about the Sunrise Life podcast, it would be immensely helpful if you could subscribe on whatever platform that you regularly listen to Sunrise Life on. And if you could leave a rating, that would make me smile so hard.